Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I'm Debashis Basu. Towards the end of every bull market, glamorous companies chaperoned by blue-blooded investment bankers dump a bunch of extremely high-priced initial public offerings or public issues on the public, whose prices drop on listing and then inflict large losses on mostly retail investors. Look at these numbers. In July 21, Cartrade made an issue of 1585. Last week, its stock price was 604, a drop of 62% in little more than a year. A few months after Cartrade came Policy Bazaar. IPO price 980. Last week, the price was 487, a drop of 50%. A week after Policy Bazaar came Paytm, the glamorous, ubiquitous payment system everywhere you can see, price 2,150. Price last week was 707, a drop of 67%. And then the big daddy of them all, Life Insurance Corporation of India, made an issue at 949. The price today is 624, a loss of 34%. Social media is rife with bitter complaints from retail investors about such mercenary pricing of IPOs. They blame the market regulator for allowing greedy investment bankers to cheat the innocent public. Now, this has happened every single time. Stung by the criticism, the Securities Exchange Board of India feels compelled to make certain cosmetic changes until the same thing happens all over again a few years later when there is a bull market and rampant or what is called mercenary IPO pricing comes in. This time, the change is, but don't hold your breath, is more disclosures. SEBI has announced stricter information disclosures in an effort to bring down the information asymmetry, as it calls it, between issuers and investors. Now, disclosure-based regime is a cornerstone of SEBI's regulation. The whole idea is that we have the issuers or market intermediaries are supposed to disclose everything to retail investors or other investors, and the investors are supposed to make up their own minds, having gone through legal documents and prospectuses and whatnot. And if they lose money, it's their problem. If there are criticism, SEBI comes out with more disclosures. And that's exactly what has happened this time. Now, what is this information asymmetry which SEBI talks about? It refers to information that probably the sellers have, but the buyers don't have. The seller knows more about what he's trying to sell, and so he can dupe the buyer. What is this information, new information that will come that will supposedly level the playing field between institutional investors and retail investors and the issuers and investment bankers among all of these market intermediaries and market players, over and above the already humongous and mandatory information deluge that comes through the offer document? SEBI has said that issuer companies, in addition to audited financial numbers, must disclose their numbers on certain key parameters in different sections of the prospectus, which are not already covered in the offer documents. It has also directed issuers to disclose details related to pricing of shares based on fundraising from private equity investors prior to IPOs. So IPO, for instance, if private equity guys have got something at 26 rupees and now it's being hawked to retail investors at 2,600, they're supposed to disclose that. Well, I mean, why was this information not there, you would ask? But even if it's there, what's going to happen? Now, the most important part of this is that issuer companies, the directors of issuer companies the independent directors will have to justify the price band to investors. Now, this can be easily circumvented, according to me. Independent directors are just going to hire an outside consultant who, for money, would say, well, this price band is very, very justified for these variety of reasons. Those reasons are anyway already there in prospectuses or in other documents when they justify the price. The biggest issue is, what will investors do with this additional information that will be placed alongside all the other information inside a 500-page legal document called Draft Red Herring Prospectus? Do they read them now? Are they going to read them now from now on? If they did, why would they be investing in duds like Cartrade, Zomato, or Paytm? If the latest set of disclosures were already in place, assume, would investors have avoided these issues? Most certainly not. So this additional information will not resolve the information asymmetry issue simply because there is no dearth of high quality information if investors really look for it. Remember, for the number of people who have invested and are complaining about these issues, millions of people have not invested in these stocks because these are loss-making companies with no immediate hope of turning profitable. That is all the information that you needed to make a decision. If you still are investing, you are really punting, you're speculating. Disclosure, though, is at the heart of India's regulatory philosophy, but it may be worth examining whether this information deluge, as I said in this 500-page IPO prospectus, is now turning out to be a complete farce. The real question is, does SEBI believe, with the benefit of hindsight, that companies like Zomato, Cartrade, etc., should not have been allowed to make IPOs? And should it, in fact, do anything about all in future to prevent retail investors from making large losses in high-priced IPOs? Now, if it is not SEBI's responsibility, as a lot of people tend to believe, then why tinker? Why bring in some minor disclosures which are not going to make a difference anyway? If, on the other hand, SEBI does feel some of these IPOs ought to have been stopped, or their pricing should have been more reasonable, mandating more disclosures is actually pointless. It has to look it has to look for some direct intervention to prevent some of these companies coming to the market. After all, SEBI does apply disclosure-based philosophy everywhere, but there are limitations to it, and to overcome those limitations it also mandates physical barriers. For instance, SEBI has mandated minimum capital requirements for advisors, for research analysts, portfolio managers, mutual funds, etc. When none of these businesses are required to use their own capital for customers, even in an emergency. No matter how much a client loses, an investment advisor or a research analyst or a portfolio manager is not asked to make good their losses from its own capital, provided it has just followed the other regulations. But SEBI has still set minimum capital requirements for all of them. In fact, in one fell swoop about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, it raised the capital requirement for mutual funds from 10 crore straight away to 100 crore, which actually kicked out a couple of people from the market, even though they were very good funds. Now, these barriers, including licensing and registration, have been erected to protect investors, according to SEBI, because SEBI knows that disclosures alone are not enough. In the same vein, SEBI can easily disallow loss-making companies from making IPOs. Allowing such PE-funded loss-making companies to make IPOs has only meant massive transfer of wealth from retail investors to PE funds that had initially invested at a fraction of the price. Ironically, disclosures have only ended giving these people, that is, lead managers, investment bankers, and issuers and private equity people, a fig leaf for this brazen ripoff. Fig leaf how? Well, we have disclosed. Now it's up to you. That's the fig leaf, and that's how exactly it will continue to operate. Banning loss-making companies from coming to the public market is simple, but the most and the first important step in delivering what is needed, a fairer IPO pricing, provided, of course, that is what SEBI actually wants. We are not sure what it wants. Thanks for watching, and if you really liked it, please just subscribe and share. Thank you.